Caleb tightened his grip on the worn, leather handle of his portfolio. As he stood before the glass doors of Vanguard Holdings, the leather was cracked and faded, a stark contrast to the polished steel and flawless glass of the skyscraper that loomed over him. It did not need to look at his reflection to know it did not belong here. His suit was second-hand, bought from a thrift store 3 years ago, and it smelled faintly of mothballs and desperate hope. He took a breath, but the air in his lungs felt heavy. It was not just the nerves. It was the message he had received at 6 in the morning. 72 hours. That was all the time he had left. The landlord had been clear this time. There would be no more extensions, no more pity, and no more waiting for the next paycheck that might never come. In 3 days, the locks would be changed. In 3 days, everything he had built for his daughter, Lily, would be thrown onto the wet pavement of the city. Caleb closed his eyes for a second, forcing the image of Lily's face into his mind. She was 9 years old, with eyes that held too much wisdom for her age. She had kissed his cheek that morning, fixing his crooked tie with her small hands. "Good luck, Daddy," she had whispered. "You are going to save us." The memory was like a knife in his chest. She did not know. She did not know that their bank account had exactly $12 in it. She did not know that this interview was not just an opportunity. It was the final wall between them and homelessness. He pushed through the revolving doors. The lobby was a different world. The silence here was expensive. Men and women moved with purpose, their shoes clicking on the marble floor with the rhythm of authority. They held phones worth more than Caleb's car. They wore watches that cost more than his father's entire life savings. Caleb walked to the reception desk. The woman behind the marble counter did not look up immediately. She finished typing a sentence, her manicured fingers moving like lightning, before she raised her eyes. Her gaze flickered over his frayed collar and the scuff marks on his shoes. It was a look he knew well. It was the look of someone deciding if you were worth their time. "I have an interview with Veronica Stone," Caleb said, his voice rougher than he intended. The receptionist raised an eyebrow. The name clearly carried weight. She typed something into her computer, her expression skeptical. "Name? Caleb Banse," she paused, scrolling down a list. After a long moment, she nodded slowly, as if surprised to find him there. "Floor 22. Take the last elevator on the right. Do not be late. She hates waiting." Caleb nodded and turned away. He could feel her eyes burning into his back as he walked toward the elevators. He stepped inside the metal box, pressing the button for the 22nd floor. 2 other men stepped in with him. They were discussing a merger, throwing around millions of dollars as if they were discussing the price of coffee. Caleb stared at the floor numbers as they climbed. 5, 10, 15. His heart hammered against his ribs. This position was for a community liaison. It was a role meant to bridge the gap between the corporate elite and the working class. Caleb knew the working class. He knew the grease under the fingernails, the ache in the back after a 12-hour shift, and the fear of the mailbox when the bills arrived. He was perfect for this job in every way that mattered, except for the pedigree. He did not have the fancy degree or the overseas internships. He had grit, he had survival instincts, and he had a daughter who needed a hero. The elevator chimed softly. 22. The doors slid open. The atmosphere on this floor was different. It was sharper, colder. The air smelled of espresso and ambition. Caleb stepped out, clutching his father's portfolio like a shield. A young assistant with a headset was rushing past, carrying a stack of files. She stopped when she saw him, her eyes widening slightly. "Mr. Vance?" she asked. "Yes. You are the last one," she said, checking her tablet. "Follow me. She is in a mood today." The last candidate left in tears. "Good luck." She turned and walked briskly down a long corridor. Caleb followed, his jaw set tight. He was not going to leave in tears. He had lost his wife, Sarah, to a sickness that took everything they had. He had buried his father, Frank, the strongest man he ever knew. He had faced eviction notices and hunger and the cold indifference of the world. A corporate CEO with a bad temper was not going to break him. The assistant stopped in front of a massive set of double doors made of dark mahogany. She knocked once, waited for a sharp voice from within, and then pushed the door open. Go ahead, she whispered, stepping back. Caleb stepped into the lion's den. The office was vast. One entire wall was made of glass, revealing the gray skyline of Seattle stretching out toward the water. But Caleb did not look at the view. His eyes locked instantly on the woman sitting behind the expansive black desk, Veronica Stone. She was younger than he expected, perhaps in her early 30s, but she possessed an aura of timeless power. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant bun that highlighted the sharp angles of her cheekbones. She wore a tailored white suit that looked like it had been sculpted rather than sewn. She did not stand up. She did not smile. She was writing something on a document, her pen moving with aggressive strokes. "Sit," she said, without looking up. Caleb sat in the leather chair opposite her. It was low, designed to make the visitor feel smaller than the person behind the desk. He kept his back straight, refusing to sink into the cushion. Veronica finished the sentence, capped her pen with a decisive click, and finally looked at him. Her eyes were the color of steel, cold and penetrating. She studied him for a long silence, dissecting him. She looked at his cheap suit, his rough hands, his defiant jaw. Most men withered under that gaze. Caleb held it. "Caleb Vance," she said, reading from a tablet on her desk. "High school diploma, mechanic certification, 10 years managing Frank's auto repair, 0 corporate experience." She dropped the tablet onto the desk with a thud. "Tell me, Mr. Vance, why am I wasting my time?" It was a test. Caleb knew it immediately. She wanted him to apologize. She wanted him to beg. "You are looking for a liaison for the outreach program," Caleb said, his voice steady. "You want someone to talk to the unions, to the factory workers, to the people in the neighborhoods where you are building your new distribution centers." "Correct," Veronica said, leaning back. "And why should I hire a mechanic to do that? I have candidates with masters, degrees in communication from Ivy League universities, waiting in the lobby, because those candidates have never had to choose between paying for heat or paying for food," Caleb replied. Veronica blinked, a flicker of surprise breaking her icy mask. Caleb leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. "You want someone to connect with the workers? You send a guy in a $5,000 suit with a degree, and they will laugh him out of the room. They will nod, smile, and then strike the moment he leaves. They do not trust you, Ms. Stone. To them, you are just a suit in a tower. And to you," she asked softly, her voice dangerous. "Tome, you are a check," Caleb said with brutal honesty. "But, if you hire me, I am the guy who speaks their language. I know what it costs to fix a transmission. I know what it feels like to have dirty hands. They will listen to me because I am one of them. You do not need another degree in this office. You need reality. And I am the only dose of reality you have seen all day. Your support gives a voice to those fighting for their dignity in a world ruled by money." Hit that like button and subscribe to help us keep telling the stories that others refuse to see. And do not close this video, because the secret connecting this desperate mechanic to the billionaire CEO is going to leave you absolutely speechless. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Veronica stared at him, her lips parted slightly. She was used to polished answers. She was used to fear. She was not used to a man who looked at her not as a queen, but as a problem to be solved. Unexpectedly, a spark of interest ignited in her eyes. It was not just professional interest. Her gaze dropped to his hands, large, scarred, capable hands resting on his knees. Then her eyes snapped back to his face. "You are arrogant," she said, though there was no real heat in the word. "I am desperate," Caleb corrected. "There is a difference." Veronica stood up. She moved around the desk, her movements fluid and predatory. She leaned against the edge of the desk, crossing her arms, putting herself just a few feet away from him. The air in the room shifted. It became charged, electric. Caleb could smell her perfume, something expensive, like vanilla and dark spices. "Desperation makes people dangerous, Mr. Vance," she murmured. "Can I trust a desperate man with my company's reputation?" "You can trust a man who has a daughter to feed," Caleb said, meeting her gaze. "I will work harder than anyone else because I have no other option. I do not have a safety net. If I fall, I hit the ground." Veronica watched him, her expression unreadable. For a moment, The cold CO vanished, and Caleb saw a woman who was lonely, bored, and intrigued by the raw intensity sitting in front of her. She took a step closer to him. The proximity was unprofessional. It was intimate. "I like your honesty," she said, her voice dropping to a lower register. "It is rare. Everyone lies to me, Caleb. Everyone tells me what they think I want to hear." She said his name like it was a secret. Caleb felt a pulse of adrenaline that had nothing to do with the job. "I do not have time for lies," he said. "Good," she whispered. She reached out, her hand hovering near his shoulder, as if she wanted to test the fabric of his cheap jacket, or perhaps the muscle underneath. The tension was a pulled rubber band, ready to snap. And then a sound shattered the moment. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Caleb froze. It was his phone. He ignored it. He had to ignore it. This was the moment. She was going to hire him. He could feel it. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The sound was loud in the quiet office. Veronica pulled back, the spell broken. In the quiet, she frowned, glancing at his pocket. "You should get that," she said coldly, stepping back behind the barrier of her desk. "It sounds urgent." "I am sorry," Caleb said, his face burning. "I will turn it off." He reached into his pocket to silence the device, but his thumb accidentally swiped the screen. The notification flashed before his eyes. It was a text message from his neighbor, Mrs. Gable. "They are here, Caleb. The sheriff just pulled up. They are putting Lily's things on the sidewalk. You need to come home. Now." The blood drained from Caleb's face. The room tilted. The job, the money, the tension with Veronica, it all vanished. 30 minutes. The landlord had lied. He was doing it early. Caleb stood up, so fast his chair scraped loudly against the floor. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded his veins. "I have to go," he choked out. Veronica looked confused, her brow furrowing. "Excuse me? We are not finished." "I have to go," Caleb repeated, backing toward the door. "I am sorry. I cannot stay." "Mr. Vance, if you walk out that door, do not bother coming back," Veronica warned, her voice rising. "This is the opportunity of a lifetime." Caleb looked at her one last time. He saw the confusion and the insult in her eyes, but he also saw the image of his little girl standing on a rainy sidewalk, watching her toys get thrown into the mud. There was no choice. There never was. "I am sorry," he said, again. He turned and sprinted out of the office, leaving the billionaire CEO standing alone in her tower, stunned into silence. Caleb did not wait for the elevator. The digital display above the brushed steel doors showed the car was stuck on the 40th floor. He cursed under his breath, a sharp sound that echoed in the silent hallway. He turned and slammed his shoulder against the door to the stairwell, bursting through it. He took the stairs 2 at a time. His lungs burned, but the physical pain was a distraction from the terror clawing at his stomach. Every second he wasted on these stairs was a second his daughter stood alone on the street. He could see it in his mind, the sheriff's deputy standing with crossed arms, the movers careless with the boxes that held the only memories Lily had of her mother. Back in the office, Veronica Stone stood frozen for exactly 5 seconds. The silence Caleb left behind was deafening. Her assistant, confident and smug, poked her head through the doorway. "I will call security, Mrs. Stone. I will have him blacklisted from the building." "What a waste of time." "No," Veronica said. The word came out before she even processed it. It was instinct. It was the same gut feeling that had told her to buy a failing tech startup 5 years ago, or to sell her stocks before the market crashed. Something about Caleb Vance, the way his eyes held a storm of pain. The way he looked at her, not with adoration but with challenge, triggered something dormant inside her. "Do not call security," Veronica ordered, grabbing her purse from the desk. "Cancel my afternoon meetings." "But, Emma Stone." "Cancel them." Veronica walked out of her office. She did not run. Veronica Stone never ran. But she moved with a velocity that made junior executives jump out of her path. She ignored the elevator bank and went straight for her private lift, pressing her thumb against the biometric scanner. The doors slid open instantly. She had to know. People did not walk away from her. People did not leave a 6-figure salary on the table because of a phone call. The private elevator dropped like a stone, bypassing all other floors. It hit the lobby level with a soft chime. Veronica stepped out, her eyes scanning the vast marble space. There, Caleb was pushing through the revolving doors, his jacket flaring behind him. He looked wild, desperate, a man unraveling at the seams. Veronica pushed past a startled security guard and followed him out onto the street. The Seattle rain had turned into a deluge. The wind whipped her hair across her face, riding the perfect bun, but she did not care. "Caleb," she shouted. Her voice was strong, trained to command boardrooms, and it cut through the noise of the traffic. Caleb stopped at the curb, frantically waving at a taxi that refused to stop for a man in a soaked cheap suit. He spun around, his eyes wide when he saw her. "What do you want?" he yelled over the rain. "I told you, I am done." Veronica marched up to him, ignoring the water soaking into her expensive silk blouse. She grabbed his arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "You do not get to dictate when this is done," she hissed. "You walked out of my office. You insulted me. I want an explanation." Caleb ripped his arm away. The desperation in his eyes turned into fury. "Explanation? You want an explanation? My 9-year-old daughter is being evicted right now. The sheriff is throwing her out into this storm because I am 3 days late on rent." The words hung in the air between them, heavier than the rain. Veronica froze. The anger in her chest evaporated, replaced by a cold shock. Evicted. The word tasted like ash. She remembered that word. She remembered the sound of a fist pounding on a door, the shame of neighbors watching, the feeling of having nowhere to go. It was a memory she had buried under billions of dollars and layers of ice, but it was still there. Caleb turned back to the street, his shoulders shaking. "I have to get to Naucalpan district. I have 20 minutes before they lock the doors." Veronica looked at the line of traffic. It was gridlock. The rain had paralyzed the city. A taxi would take an hour. The bus would take 2. "You will never make it," she said. Her voice was no longer angry. It was factual. "You have to," Caleb screamed, his voice breaking. He promised her. He looked like he was about to step into traffic and run the 10 miles on foot. Veronica made a decision. It was irrational. It was dangerous. It was completely unlike her. "Come with me," she commanded. Caleb looked at her, confused. "What?" "My car is in the executive bay. I can get us there in 15 minutes. Caleb hesitated. He looked at the woman who represented everything. He hated wealth, privilege, indifference. But then he looked at the traffic that was not moving. "Why?" he asked, water dripping from his nose. "Because I hate losing," Veronica lied. "And right now, you look like a loser. Get in." She turned and walked toward the private garage entrance. After a heartbeat of hesitation, Caleb followed. The garage was quiet and smelled of concrete and gasoline. Veronica walked straight to a low, black beast of a machine parked in the reserved spot nearest the elevator. It was a sports car that cost more than the entire apartment building Caleb lived in. She unlocked it, the lights flashing like the eyes of a predator waking up. "Get in," she ordered, sliding into the driver's seat. Caleb opened the passenger door and dropped into the low bucket seat. The leather smelled of new money. He felt filthy sitting there in his wet clothes, but Veronica did not seem to notice. She pressed the start button, and the engine roared to life with a deep, aggressive growl that vibrated through Caleb's chest. "Buckle up," she said. Caleb barely had time to click the belt before Veronica slammed the car into gear. The tires skid against the polished concrete as she whipped the car around the corner and shot up the ramp toward the street. They burst out of the garage and into the rain. The traffic was a wall of red tail lights. Caleb slammed his hand against the dashboard. "We are stuck. I told you. It is impossible." Veronica did not look at him. Her eyes were fixed on the road, her expression terrifyingly calm. Her hands gripped the leather steering wheel with white-knuckled precision. "Watch me," she whispered. She jerked the wheel to the right, cutting across 3 lanes of traffic. Horns blared around them, a symphony of anger. Caleb flinched, grabbing the handle above the door. "Are you crazy?" he shouted. Veronica ignored him. She saw a gap that no normal driver would attempt. She punched the accelerator. The car surged forward, pinning Caleb back against his seat. The force was incredible. They shot through the gap with inches to spare. She drove with a mix of elegance and violence. She treated the heavy traffic like a chessboard, anticipating movements before they happened. She used the bus lanes. She cut through service alleys. She aggressively merged until other cars were forced to brake. Caleb watched her profile. Her jaw was set, her eyes narrowed. She looked beautiful and terrifying. This was not the board executive behind a desk. This was a woman who knew how to fight. "Where did you learn to drive like this?" Caleb asked, his heart pounding in his throat. "You learn a lot of things when you are running away from your past," Veronica muttered. Swerving around a delivery truck. The cabin of the car was small, intimate. The heater was blasting to combat the chill of their wet clothes. The smell of rain and her perfume filled Caleb's senses. She looked at her hands on the wheel, no rings, manicured but strong. "How much time?" she asked, not taking her eyes off the wet asphalt. Caleb checked his phone. His hand was shaking so bad, he almost dropped it. 12 minutes. "Hold on." She downshifted. The engine screamed. They hit the highway on ramp. Traffic was heavy here too, but moving. Veronica wove between cars at speeds that would definitely get them arrested if a cop saw them. Caleb looked out the window. The city was blurring past. For the first time in hours, he felt a sliver of hope. "Why are you doing this?" he asked quietly. "You do not know me. You do not owe me anything. In fact, I was rude to you." Veronica tightened her grip on the wheel. She could not tell him the truth. She could not tell him that seeing the terror in his eyes had cracked the armor she had worn for 15 years. She could not tell him that she knew exactly what it felt like to be powerless. "I am investing," she said coldly. "Investing? I see potential in you, Caleb. But potential is useless if you are distracted by a crisis. If I solve the crisis, I get the employee I want. It is just business." Caleb looked at her, studying the hard line of her mouth. He did not believe her. Business did not drive like a maniac through a monsoon. Business did not ruin Italian leather seats with a wet mechanic. But he did not push. He could not afford to push. "We are getting close," Caleb said, pointing at the exit sign. "It is the next one. The neighborhood. It is rough." "I can handle rough," Veronica said. She took the exit ramp too fast, the tires hydroplaning for a split second before gripping the road again. Caleb held his breath. She regained control instantly. They entered the district. The skyscrapers disappeared, replaced by crumbling brick buildings, barred windows, and overflowing dumpsters. The road was full of potholes. Veronica's luxury car looked like a spaceship that had crash-landed in a war zone. People on the sidewalk stopped to stare as the black machine roared past. "Turn left here," Caleb directed, leaning forward. "Then the second right. It is the building with the faded blue paint." Veronica navigated the narrow streets. Her heart was beating faster now, not from the speed, but from what was coming. She was stepping out of her ivory tower and back into the mud she had crawled out of. "There," Caleb shouted. Veronica slammed on the brakes. The car skidded to a halt in front of a dilapidated apartment complex. The scene on the sidewalk was chaos. Two large men were carrying a worn-out sofa out the front door. A sheriff's deputy stood by his cruiser, writing on a clipboard, and there, sitting on a plastic crate under the overhang of the building, hugging a stuffed bear that had lost one eye, was a small girl, Lily. She looked small, wet, and terrified. Caleb did not wait for the car to stop completely. He threw the door open and scrambled out, nearly slipping on the wet pavement. "Lily," he roared. Veronica watched from the driver's seat. She saw the little girl's face light up with relief. She saw Caleb drop to his knees in the rain and wrap his arms around his daughter, burying his face in her small shoulder. Veronica felt a sharp pain in her chest. It was envy. It was grief. It was a longing for something she could not name. She turned off the engine. The silence inside the car was sudden. She took a deep breath, checked her reflection in the rearview mirror, and hardened her expression. She was not a savior. She was a CEO. She had a deal to close. Veronica opened her door and stepped out into the rain. Her heels clicked on the broken sidewalk as she walked toward the reunion, ready to buy a man's life. The rain hammered against the hood of the sheriff's cruiser, but the silence between the three men on the sidewalk was louder than the storm. The landlord, a short man with greedy eyes, held a clipboard against his chest. The deputy looked bored, ready to finish the job. Caleb stood between them and his daughter, his fists clenched at his sides, his body a trembling wall of defiance that was slowly crumbling. Then, the clicking of heels cut through the noise. Veronica Stone walked onto the scene like she was stepping onto a runway, not a flooded sidewalk in the poorest district of the city. She ignored the mud splashing onto her trousers. She stopped directly in front of the landlord, towering over him despite being shorter, radiating a cold, lethal authority. "Who is in charge here?" she asked, though the question sounded more like a command. The landlord blinked, taken aback by the sudden appearance of a woman who clearly wore more money on her wrist than he made in a decade. "I am the property owner," he stammered. "Mr. Vance is 3 months behind. The eviction is legal. We are just following procedure." Veronica looked at the furniture soaking on the wet concrete. She looked at the child clinging to the stuffed bear. Then she looked back at the landlord with absolute disgust. 3 months of rent, she stated. "How much is that, exactly?" The landlord cleared his throat. "With late fees and the eviction processing charge, it is $2,400. Veronica did not blink. She reached into her purse and pulled out a checkbook. She uncapped a gold pen and wrote against the leather of her bag. She ripped the check out with a sharp tear and held it out between 2 fingers. "Here is a check for $10,000, she said. The landlord's eyes nearly popped out of his head. He reached for it, but Veronica pulled it back an inch. "That covers the back rent, the next year of rent for whoever moves in after, and a premium for your inconvenience," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper that only he and Caleb could hear. "But you are going to call your men off immediately. You are going to have them put every single item back inside that apartment, dry and undamaged. And if I hear that you ever threatened a child with homelessness again, I will have my legal team buy this building just to evict you. Do you understand?" "I understand," the landlord squeaked. He snatched the check and immediately started shouting at the movers to reverse the process. Caleb watched, stunned. The weight that had been crushing his chest for months vanished in 10 seconds. He looked at Veronica, struggling to reconcile the ruthless executive with the woman who had just saved his life. She turned to him, her face unreadable. "Get your daughter inside," she said. "Get her dry. Then come back out. We need to talk." Caleb nodded. He scooped Lily up, whispering promises that everything was okay, and carried her into the building. 10 minutes later, he walked back out. The rain had slowed to a drizzle. Veronica was leaning against her black sports car, checking her phone. She looked out of place, a diamond in the dirt. "Thank you," Caleb said, his voice thick with emotion. "I do not know how I can ever repay you. I will work it off. Whatever the job is, I will do it." Veronica looked up. The softness a thought he had seen earlier was gone, replaced by the shark-like focus of a CEO making a deal. "The community liaison job is gone, Caleb." Caleb felt his stomach drop. "What? But you just paid." "I do not need a liaison anymore," she interrupted. "I saw how you drove today. I saw how you handled yourself in my office. I saw how you looked ready to fight the entire world for your daughter." She pushed off the car and stepped closer to him. "I have enemies, Caleb. People who want my company, my position, and my legacy. My last driver sold my itinerary to the press. My last assistant was a spy for a rival firm. I am surrounded by sharks in suites." Caleb frowned. "What are you asking?" "I need someone who is not part of my world," Veronica said. "Someone who understands loyalty because he knows what it costs to lose everything. I want to hire you as my personal head of security and private driver." Caleb blinked. "Security? I am a mechanic, Veronica. I fix engines. You protected your daughter today with nothing but your bare hands and desperation," she countered. "That is the instinct I need. I can hire trained guards, but they can be bought. You have a debt." She named a salary. It was a number so high, Caleb had to process it for a full second. It was enough to put Lily through college. It was enough to buy a house in cash within 2 years. "There is a condition," Veronica added, her eyes locking onto his. What condition? The job requires 24/7 availability. You and your daughter will move into the guest estate on my property. You live where I live. You move when I move. Your life belongs to me. Caleb looked at the crumbling apartment building behind him. He looked at the checkbook in her hand. He thought of the safety she was offering Lily and the dangerous gleam in Veronica's eyes. He knew, deep down, that getting close to this woman was like walking into a fire. She was complicated, broken, and powerful. But he had no choice. He accept, Caleb said. Veronica nodded, eyes small, triumphant smile playing on her lips. Good. Pack your things. We leave in an hour. The iron gates of the stone estate swung open slowly, revealing a winding driveway lined with ancient oak trees. Caleb steered his battered pickup truck through the entrance, following Veronica's sleek sports car. In the passenger seat, Lily pressed her face against the glass, her eyes wide with wonder. Is this a castle, Daddy? She whispered. It looks like one, baby, Caleb murmured. The main house was a sprawling mansion of grey stone and glass, modern yet imposing. But Veronica did not stop there. She led them around the side to a smaller, separate structure. The guest house was larger than any home Caleb had ever lived in. It had 2 stories, a wraparound porch and a view of the manicured gardens. Veronica stepped out of her car as Caleb parked. She watched them get out, her arms crossed against the evening chill. Here are the keys, she said, tossing a set of silver keys to Caleb. He caught them out of the air. It is fully furnished. The kitchen is stocked. My housekeeper will bring over uniforms for you tomorrow. Uniforms? Caleb asked, his brow furrowing. Veronica's eyes swept over his flannel shirt and jeans. You work for me now, Caleb. You represent the brand. Black suits, crisp shirts, no grease stains. She turned to look at Lily, who was hiding behind Caleb's leg. Veronica's expression softened, just for a fraction of a second. There is a pool in the back, she said to the child. You are allowed to use it. Lily Behamed. Thank you, Miss Lady. Emstone, Veronica corrected gently. Then she looked at Caleb. Get settled. Report to the main house. At 7 in the morning. Do not be late. She turned and walked away, her heels clicking on the pavement, disappearing into the fortress of her main house. That night, Caleb could not sleep. The bed was too soft. The silence of the estate was unnatural compared to the sirens and shouting of the city. He got up, restless, and decided to check the perimeter. He was security now, after all. He walked around the garden, checking the locks on the gates. The air was cool and smelled of jasmine. As he circled back toward the guest house, he glanced up at the main mansion. A single light was on in the master bedroom on the 2nd floor. Through the sheer curtains, he saw a silhouette, Veronica. She was standing by the window, looking out into the darkness. She was wearing a silk robe, holding a glass of wine. From her vantage point, Veronica looked down. She saw him. Caleb was standing in the moonlight, looking up at her. He had taken off his jacket, and his white t-shirt stretched tight across his chest. For a long minute, neither of them moved. They were separated by 50 yards of manicured grass and a massive social divide. Yet, the connection was instant and physical. Veronica took a sip of wine, her eyes never leaving him. She should close the curtains. She should look away. But she felt a hunger she had not felt in years. He looked rough, dangerous, and incredibly real. Caleb broke the trance first. He nodded once, a gesture of respect, and turned away, walking back into the shadows. Veronica let out a breath. She did not realize she had been holding, her hand trembling slightly against the cool glass of the window. The next morning, the peace was shattered. Caleb was in the driveway of the main house, polishing the black sports car as requested. He was wearing the new black suit trousers and a white shirt, sleeves rolled up to his elbows. A red convertible roared up the driveway, ignoring the speed limit signs. It screeched to a halt inches from where Caleb was standing. A man stepped out. He was in his 40s, handsome in a slimy way, wearing a suit that cost more than Veronica's car. This was Marcus, the vice president of Vanguard Holdings and the man who wanted Veronica's job. He tossed his keys at Caleb without looking at him. Park it, boy, and be careful. The paint is custom. Caleb let the keys drop to the ground. They hit the asphalt with a metallic clatter. Marcus stopped. It turned slowly, his face flushing red. "Excuse-me, pick those up." "I am Ines Stone's driver," Caleb said calmly, wiping a spot on the hood of Veronica's car. "Not yours." Marcus marched over, invading Caleb's personal space. "You are the help. You do what I tell you, or I will have you fired before lunch. Do you know who I am?" "I know you are blocking the driveway," Caleb said, straightening up to his full height. It towered over Marcus. Marcus sneered. He raised a hand, perhaps to poke Caleb's chest, perhaps to snap his fingers in his face. Before he could make contact, Caleb caught his wrist. He did not squeeze hard, just enough to show total control. "Do not touch me," Caleb said. His voice was low, lacking any aggression, which made it terrifying. "Let go of him." Veronica's voice cracked like a whip. She stood at the front door of the mansion, holding a tablet. She looked furious. Caleb released Marcus instantly, stepping back and clasping his hands behind his back. Marcus rubbed his wrist, putting on a show of being the victim. "Veronica, you need to leash your dog. He assaulted me." "He saw the whole thing, Marcus," Veronica said, walking down the steps. "You treated my staff like a valet. You are lucky he only held your wrist." She stopped in front of Caleb, looking him up and down. She saw the tension in his shoulders, the protective stance he had taken. A thrill went through her. No one had ever stood up to Marcus for her before. "Get inside, Marcus," she said coldly. "We have a board meeting to prepare for." Marcus glared at Caleb with pure venom. "This is not over, mechanic," he spat, before storming into the house. Veronica stayed behind for a moment. She looked at Caleb. The air between them hummed with unspoken words. "You do not need to fight my battles," she said softly. "Edis respected you," Caleb replied simply. "Edis respected your home." Veronica looked at his hands, the same hands that had stopped a man from touching her. She felt a dangerous urge to reach out and touch him, to thank him in a way that had nothing to do with business. "Finish the car," she said, her voice slightly breathless. "Then bring it around. We are going to be late." She turned and fled back into the safety of her house, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. She had brought a wolf into her home to protect her, but she was starting to realize that the wolf might be the most dangerous thing of all. The 22nd floor of the Vanguard building was a tomb of silence, broken only by the rhythmic drumming of rain against the floor-to-ceiling glass. It was 2 in the morning. The cleaners had left hours ago, the junior executives had gone home to their families, and the city lights below were beginning to flicker out one by one. Inside the executive suite, only 2 people remained. Veronica sat at her desk, surrounded by towers of documents. Her hair was no longer in its perfect bun, strands of it fell across her face, and she rubbed her temples with a weary frustration. She had been staring at the same merger contract for 3 hours. Caleb stood by the door, a silent sentinel in his black suit. He had been standing there for 6 hours straight, without complaining. He watched her reflection in the glass window. He saw the way her shoulders slumped when she thought he was not looking. He saw the exhaustion etched into the lines of her face. "You should sit down," Caleb said, his voice startling her in the quiet room. Veronica looked up, blinking. "I am fine." "You are not fine," Caleb countered, walking over to the small kitchenette in the corner of the office. "You have read that same page 5 times in the last 20 minutes. He poured a cup of black coffee from the pot he had brewed an hour ago and placed it on her desk. Veronica looked at the steaming cup, then up at him. Her eyes were red-rimmed. "You are observant for a mechanic," she murmured, reaching for the mug. "I am security now, remember?" Caleb said, a small, rare smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "My job is to watch you. And right now, I see a CEO who is about to collapse." Veronica took a sip of the coffee. It was perfect, strong, hot, exactly how she needed it. She sighed, the sound heavy with the weight of the world. "If I do not finish this by morning, Marcus will use it against me at the board meeting. He will say, I am losing my edge. He will say, a woman cannot handle the pressure of $1 billion acquisition." "Let him talk," Caleb said, leaning against the edge of her desk. His proximity was a breach of protocol, but neither of them cared. Marcus is a noisemaker. You are the engine. The engine does not care what the noise thinks. Veronica let out a short, tired laugh. Is that car wisdom? It is life wisdom, Caleb replied softly. Veronica spun her chair around to face him fully. She looked at his tie, which was slightly loosened, and the dark stubble appearing on his jaw. He looked tired too, but he stood solid as a rock. Why do you stay? She asked quietly. You could be at the guest house, sleeping. You could be with your daughter. Lily is with the nanny you hired, Caleb said. She is safe, and I stay because that is the job. Is it just a job? The question hung in the air, charged and dangerous. Caleb looked into her eyes. He saw the loneliness behind the steel armor. He saw a woman who had fought everyone for everything she had, and who was terrified of letting anyone in. No, Caleb admitted, his voice dropping to a rough whisper. It is not just a job. Veronica stood up. She moved slowly, as if drawn by a magnetic force. She stepped around the desk until she was standing inches from him. Caleb did not retreat. He held his ground, his heart hammering against his ribs. You confuse me, Caleb Bansi, she whispered. You look at me like you see me. Not the bank account. Not the title. Just me. Caleb reached out. It was an instinct he could not control. His hand brushed a stray lock of hair away from her cheek. His fingers were rough, calloused from years of manual labor, and the contrast against her soft skin sent a shiver through her body. I see you, Veronica, he said. Veronica leaned into his touch. Her eyes fluttered closed. The air in the room became heavy, thick with a tension that had been building since the moment they met. The smell of rain and coffee and desire swirled around them. She opened her eyes, dark and dilated. She tilted her head back, her lips parting slightly. Caleb. He lowered his head. He could feel the warmth of her breath. He could see the pulse beating frantically in her neck. He wanted to kiss her. He wanted to pull her into him, and forget about the contracts and the debts and the social divide that separated them. His lips brushed against her jawline, a feather-light touch that made her gasp. Suddenly, a piercing sound shattered the world. While. The emergency alarm screamed through the office. Red strobe lights began to flash in the hallway, painting the room in violent crimson bursts. Veronica humped back, gasping, her hand flying to her chest. The moment was murdered instantly. Caleb shifted from lover to protector in a fraction of a second. He grabbed her arm, pulling her behind him. Stay here, he ordered, his voice hard. What is it? Is it a fire? Veronica shouted over the siren. Caleb looked at the security panel on the wall. No. It is a perimeter breach. Someone is in the server room. Caleb drew a tactical baton from inside his jacket. He was not licensed to carry a firearm, yet and moved toward the door. Lock this behind me, he commanded. Do not open it for anyone but me. Caleb, Veronica cried out, but he was already gone, sprinting down the flashing red corridor. He moved with silent speed, his mechanic's boots making no sound on the carpet. The server room was at the end of the hall. The door was ajar. Caleb flattened himself against the wall. He listened. He heard the rustle of papers, the click of a hard drive being disconnected. He swung around the doorframe, ready to fight. Freeze! He roared. A figure dressed in black, wearing a ski mask, looked up from the server rack. The intruder panicked. Instead of fighting, he threw a heavy metal toolbox at Caleb and bolted for the fire exit. Caleb dodged the box, but the split second cost him. The intruder slammed through the emergency exit door, disappearing into the stairwell. Caleb chased him to the landing, but the footsteps were already echoing floors below. It was too late. He could not leave Veronica, alone upstairs, to chase a ghost down 20 flights of stairs. He cursed and walked back to the server room. The intruder had been interrupted before he could steal the main drive, but the room was a mess. Caleb looked down at the floor. The toolbox the intruder had thrown was lying open. Tools were scattered across the carpet. Caleb knelt to pick one up. It was a torque wrench. He turned it over in his hands. It was old, heavy, and covered in a specific type of grease. He squinted at the handle. Etched into the metal were initials, barely visible. Emma, Miguel Ramirez, Caleb Froese. That was a common name, but the brand of the tool ironclad was vintage. They stopped making these 20 years ago. It was the kind of tool an old-school mechanic used. Why would a corporate spy use a mechanic's wrench? He pocketed the tool, a cold feeling settling in his stomach. He returned to Veronica's office. She was standing by the window, shaking. He got away, Caleb reported, holstering his baton. But he did not get the data. You are safe. Veronica exhaled, her knees buckling slightly. Caleb caught her before she fell, holding her steady. Take me home, Caleb, she whispered. Please. He cannot be here anymore. The drive back to the estate was silent. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and black. That night, Veronica could not sleep. When she finally drifted off, the nightmare came. It was always the same dream. She was 19 years old. It was raining. She was stranded on the side of a dark highway in a broken-down sedan. She was pregnant, alone, and terrified. A truck pulled up. A man got out. He was huge, with grease-stained hands. In the dream, she could never see his face, only his hands. He fixed her car. He gave her money. He told her, dignity is not bought, it is earned. She woke up, gasping for air, her sheets soaked in sweat. It was morning. The sun was streaming through the curtains. She needed water. Veronica put on her silk robe and walked down to the kitchen. She stopped in the doorway. Caleb was there. He was under the kitchen sink, fixing a leaking pipe that the housekeeper had complained about. He had taken off his suit jacket and rolled up his sleeves. His forearms were flexed as he tightened a bolt. He slid out from under the cabinet and sat up, wiping his hands on a rag. Good morning, he said. Sorry, the washer was dripping. I fixed it. Veronica stared at his hands. There, on the base of his right thumb, was a jagged white scar. The world seemed to tilt. In her dream, in her memory, the mechanic who saved her had cut his hand on her radiator fan. She remembered watching the blood drip onto the wet asphalt. She remembered the location of the cut. It was identical. Veronica felt a wave of dizziness. It was impossible. Caleb was too young. The man who saved her would be in his 60s by now. Where did you get that scar? She asked, her voice trembling. Caleb looked down at his hand. It traced the line with his finger. My father, he said quietly. He cut my hand on a fan belt when I was 12, helping him in the shop. He stitched it up himself because we could not afford a hospital. He taught me everything I know. Your father, Veronica whispered. What was his name? Frank, Caleb said. Frank Vance. Veronica let out a breath. The name did not match. The man who saved her had a different name. She was sure of it. Or was she? It was 15 years ago. She had been in shock. It is just a coincidence, she told herself. Just a scar. But the seed of doubt had been planted. Before she could say anything else, her phone buzzed on the marble counter. It was a notification from a gossip blog. She picked it up. Her face went pale. There was a photo. It was grainy, taken with a long-range lens through the window of her office the previous night. It showed her and Caleb standing inches apart, her head tilted back, his hand on her face. The headline screamed in bold letters, The Billionaire and the Bodyguard. Scandal at Vanguard? Veronica dropped the phone. Marcus, she hissed. Caleb stood up, wiping the last of the grease from his hands. What is it? Veronica looked at him, panic rising in her chest. We have a problem, Caleb. A big one. Marcus did not just want the data last night. He wanted a show, and we gave him one. She turned the phone so he could see. Caleb looked at the photo. It looked intimate. It looked compromising. It looked like the end of his career, and potentially the end of hers. The alarm last night. Caleb realized, his eyes narrowing. It was a distraction. He wanted me to leave the room so he could get a clear shot through the window. We played right into his hands, Veronica said, her voice turning cold again, the armor sliding back into place. What do we do? Caleb asked. Veronica looked at him. The softness from the night before was gone. She was the CEO again, calculating, ruthless, and cornered. "We deny everything," she said. "And you? You need to stay away from me. Starting now. You are my driver, Caleb. Nothing more. Do you understand?" Caleb felt the rejection like a physical blow, and nodded slowly, his jaw tightening. "Understood, Ms. Stone." He picked up his tools and walked out of the kitchen, leaving Veronica alone with her secrets, her nightmares, and a scandal that threatened to burn everything she had built. The scandal did not die down. It exploded. By noon the next day, the blurry photograph of Caleb touching Veronica's face was on every business blog and gossip site in the country. The investors were panicking. The board was calling for an emergency meeting. Veronica stood in the center of her dressing room, staring at the red silk gown hanging on the mannequin. She looked like a general preparing for war, not a woman preparing for a charity gala. Her phone buzzed. It was her publicist for the 10th time. "Deny it, Veronica. Fire him. Issue a statement that he was removing an eyelash from your cheek. Anything." Veronica hung up. She did not hide. She never hid. She walked out of her room and down the grand staircase of the estate. At the bottom, Caleb was waiting. He was wearing his standard black suit, his posture rigid. He looked like a man expecting to be fired. "Caleb," Veronica said, stopping on the last step. "Emma Stone," Caleb replied, his voice devoid of emotion. "I have the car ready. We can take the back exit to avoid the press at the gate." "No," Veronica said. Caleb looked up, confusion flickering in his dark eyes. "We are not taking the back exit," she continued. "And you are not driving. I have hired a service for tonight." Caleb nodded slowly. "I understand. I will pack my things." Veronica laughed, a short, sharp sound. "You are not fired, Caleb. You are my date." Caleb stared at her. "Excuse me?" "The best way to kill a rumor is to own it," Veronica said, descending the final step. "If I hide you, I look guilty. If I fire you, I look guilty. But if I walk into that gala with you on my arm, head held high, I control the narrative. We are not lovers. We are a team. And tonight, you are going to play the part of the trusted advisor, not the mechanic." She snapped her fingers. A tailor stepped out from the shadows of the hallway, holding a garment bag. "Go upstairs," Veronica ordered. "Put this on. We leave in 45 minutes. Half an hour later, Caleb stood in front of the full-length mirror in the guest room. He barely recognized the man staring back. The tuxedo was midnight blue, tailored to perfection. It hugged his broad shoulders and tapered at the waist. The white shirt was crisp, the silk bow tie expertly knotted by the tailor. He looked powerful. He looked like he belonged in the penthouse, not the garage. He walked back to the main house. Veronica was waiting in the foyer. When she heard his footsteps, she turned around. The air left her lungs. She had seen him in grease-stained coveralls. She had seen him in a cheap suit. But this was different. Caleb looked devastating. The tuxedo did not hide his rugged edge. It sharpened it. He looked like a predator in velvet. Caleb stopped in front of her. His eyes swept over her red dress, which clung to every curve before cascading to the floor. "You look expensive," he said, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "And you clean up well for a man who washes his hands with industrial soap," Veronica replied, though her voice was slightly breathless. The drive to the gala was silent, but the air inside the limousine was thick. When they arrived, the red carpet was a blinding storm of camera flashes. "Ready?" Veronica asked, her hand hovering over the door handle. "No," Caleb admitted. "Good," Veronica said. "Fear keeps you sharp." The chauffeur opened the door. Veronica stepped out first, followed by Caleb. The crowd went wild. Questions were shouted from every direction. "Ms. Stone, is he the one? Who is the mystery man? Are the rumors true?" Veronica ignored them all. She looped her arm through Caleb's. Her grip was tight, grounding him. They walked the carpet together, a united front. Caleb kept his face neutral, scanning the crowd for threats, playing the role of the protector perfectly. Inside the ballroom, the atmosphere was suffocatingly rich. Chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the ceiling. Waiters moved like ghosts with trays of champagne. Marcus was there, of course. He stood by the bar, holding a whiskey, his eyes narrowing as he saw them enter. He looked like a snake waiting to strike. "Do not look at him," Veronica whispered, leaning close to Caleb's ear. "Focus on me." The orchestra began to play a waltz. "Dance with me," Veronica commanded. Caleb looked at her. He did not know how to waltz. "Follow my lead," she said. "It is just like an engine. It has a rhythm. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. She pulled him onto the floor. Caleb placed one hand on her waist, the other holding her hand. Her waist was firm, her skin warm. The contact sent a jolt of electricity through him that nearly made him miss a step. They moved together. Caleb was a fast learner. He found the rhythm, his natural coordination taking over. They spooned through the crowd, passing swirling gowns and judging eyes. "Everyone is staring," Caleb murmured, pulling her slightly closer than necessary. "Let them stare," Veronica whispered back, looking up into his eyes. "Let them wonder." For a moment, the room disappeared. There was no gala, no scandal, no Marcus. There was just the heat of her hand in his, the scent of her perfume, and the way her eyes softened when she looked at him. It was a dangerous game. They were supposed to be pretending, but the chemistry was undeniably real. The music ended. They parted, breathless. "I need a drink," Veronica said, her voice shaky. "I will get it," Caleb offered. He walked toward the bar, weaving through the crowd. He ordered a sparkling water for her. As he turned to leave, a hand clamped onto his shoulder. It was Marcus. "Mr. Vance," Marcus purred. "Or should I call you Grease Monkey? You put on a good show out there." Caleb shrugged the hand off. "I am working, Marcus." "Walk away." Marcus chuckled, taking a sip of his whiskey. "You think she cares about you?" "You are a prop, Caleb. A distraction. When she is done with you, she will toss you back into the gutter where she found you." Caleb stepped closer, invading Marcus' personal space. His voice dropped to a low growl. "Is that all?" Marcus leaned in, his breath smelling of expensive alcohol. "I did a background check on you. I know about the debt. I know about the eviction. I know you are desperate." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Here is a check for $50,000, Marcus whispered. "Take it, walk out that door, leave the city, and leave Veronica to me." Caleb looked at the check. It was more money than he had made in the last 3 years combined. It was freedom. He looked at Marcus. Then he looked across the room at Veronica, who was laughing politely at a dull conversation with an elderly investor. She looked lonely. Caleb took the check. Marcus smiled triumphant. "A smart boy." Caleb slowly ripped the check in half, then in quarters. He dropped the confetti-like pieces into Marcus's drink. "I am not for sale," Caleb said calmly. "And if you ever come near me or my daughter again, I will not be wearing a tuxedo, and you will not be walking away." He turned and walked back to Veronica, leaving Marcus staring into his ruined whiskey with a look of pure hatred. The ride back to the estate was tense. The adrenaline from the gala was fading, leaving behind a raw, exposed nerve. Veronica sat on the far side of the limousine, staring out the window. Caleb watched her. He could see the tremor in her hands. "You were reckless," she said suddenly, breaking the silence. Caleb frowned. "What?" "I saw you with Marcus," she said, turning to face him. "I saw you threaten him. You made an enemy of the most dangerous man in my company." "He handled him," Caleb argued. "He tried to bribe me. He turned him down." "You should have just walked away," Veronica snapped. "You do not understand this world, Caleb. Men like Marcus do not fight with fists. They fight with lawyers, with lies, with ruin. You just put a target on your back." "He can handle a target," Caleb shot back. "I was protecting you. That is my job, isn't it? Or was that just part of the act too?" The car stopped in front of the main house. Veronica threw the door open and stormed out. Caleb followed her, catching up to her in the grand foyer. "Veronica, wait." She spun around, her eyes blazing. "Do not tell me to wait. You have no idea what is at stake. I built this company from nothing. I sacrificed everything for it. And you waltz in here with your honor and your hero complex, and you risk blowing it all up." "I risked it for you," Caleb shouted, his voice echoing off the marble walls. Because I care about you, not the company, you. The silence that followed was sudden and absolute. Veronica stared at him, her chest heaving. The anger in her eyes began to morph into something else, something darker, hungrier. You care? She whispered. You are a fool. She turned to go up the stairs. Caleb moved faster. He caught her arm, spinning her around. Tell me you did not feel it, he challenged, his face inches from hers. Tell me that tonight, on that dance floor, it was all a lie. Veronica looked at his mouth. She looked at the fire in his eyes. Her resolve shattered. She did not answer. Instead, she grabbed the lapels of his tuxedo and pulled him crashing into her. The kiss was not gentle. It was a collision. It was weeks of suppressed desire, anger, and fear exploding all at once. Caleb groaned, his arms wrapping around her waist, lifting her slightly off the ground. He pressed her back against the wall, his hands tangling in her hair, writing the perfect style. Veronica kissed him back with a desperation that frightened her. She needed this. She needed to feel something other than the cold pressure of her life. She needed his heat, his strength, his reality. Caleb's hands moved down her back, pulling her flush against him. The friction of the silk dress against his suit was maddening. He trailed kisses down her neck, making her gasp and arch into him. Caleb, she breathed, his name a plea and a warning. For a minute, they were just a man and a woman, lost in the storm of their own making. There was no boss, no employee, no scandal, just a skin and breath and heartbeats. But then, reality crashed back in. Veronica opened her eyes. She saw the grand chandelier above them. She saw the portrait of her grandfather on the wall. She remembered who she was. She remembered that everyone she had ever loved had left her or died. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through the haze of passion. Stop, she gasped, pushing against his chest. Caleb froze. He pulled back immediately, his breathing heavy, his eyes dark with desire. Veronica? Veronica stumbled back, straightening her dress with shaking hands. She looked terrified. This is a mistake, she stammered. Caleb looked at her, confused and hurt. A mistake? Veronica, do not do this. Do not pretend this isn't real. It cannot be real, she cried out. You are my employee, Caleb. I am your boss. This is a disaster waiting to happen. She was retreating behind her walls again, adding new bricks with every word. You are just like everyone else, she said, her voice turning cruel to protect herself. You want to save me? You want to be the hero? I do not need a hero, Caleb. I need a driver. The words hit Caleb like physical blows. He took a step back, his face hardening. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by the mask of the mechanic who had learned to expect nothing from the world. Is that all I am? He asked quietly. The help? Yes, Veronica lied. Though her heart was breaking into 1,000 pieces, that is all you are. Caleb looked at her for a long moment. He saw the fear in her eyes, but he also saw the wall she had built. He knew he could not break it down tonight, maybe never. Understood, Miss Stone, he said coldly. Ed turned and walked out of the front door into the cool night air. Veronica watched him go. As soon as the door clicked shut, she sank to the floor, burying her face in her hands. She sat there on the cold marble in her red gown and wept for the first time in 15 years. Caleb walked back to the guest house. He did not turn on the lights. He sat on the edge of his bed, still in his tuxedo, and pulled out the old photo of his father. You were right, Dad, he whispered to the picture. You cannot buy dignity. And apparently, you cannot buy a heart that is too scared to beat. He took off the tuxedo jacket and threw it on the floor. He felt foolish. He felt used. But more than that, he felt a storm coming, and he knew that next time, he might not be able to protect her from it. The morning sun hit the glass walls of the Vanguard building, but inside Veronica's office, the temperature felt below freezing. Caleb stood by the door, his hands clasped behind his back, his face a mask of professional indifference. He had returned to being the driver, just as she had asked. The passion from the night before had been locked away in a box, buried deep under layers of silence and hurt. Veronica sat at her desk, trying to focus on the merger documents, but the words blurred together. Every time she looked up and saw him standing there, her heart ached. She wanted to apologize. She wanted to scream. She wanted to run into his arms again. But fear kept her glued to her leather chair. The intercom buzzed, shattering the tense silence. Stone, Marcus is here. He says it is urgent. Veronica sighed, rubbing her temples. Send him in. The door swung open. Marcus walked in, but he was not alone. He was accompanied by 2 uniformed security guards and the head of the IT department. Marcus did not have his usual smirk. He looked grave, serious, and dangerously triumphant. What is this? Veronica asked, standing up. We have a problem, Veronica, Marcus said, placing a metallic hard drive on her desk. A massive data breach. The confidential blueprints for the new electric engine prototype were stolen from the server last night. Veronica frowned. Stolen? But the alarm went off. We thought the intruder failed. It failed to take the physical drive, the IT head explained nervously, but we found a mirrored copy. Someone downloaded the files onto a portable drive before the alarm was triggered. We just found this drive hidden in the staff garage. Hidden where? Veronica asked, her stomach tightening. Marcus turned slowly and pointed a finger at Caleb. In his locker. Inside his toolbox. Caleb did not flinch, but his eyes narrowed into slits. That is a lie. Is it? Marcus asked, pulling a pair of latex gloves from his pocket. He picked up the drive. We have camera footage of you entering the garage at 2 in the morning, right after the alarm was triggered. You said you were chasing the intruder. But maybe you were just stashing the evidence. Caleb stepped forward, his voice low and dangerous. I was chasing the man you hired, Marcus. Do not twist this. Veronica looked between them. Her heart was hammering against her ribs. She looked at Caleb, the man who had held her last night, the man she wanted to trust. Then she looked at the drive on her desk. The evidence of betrayal. Veronica, Marcus said softly, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. I told you he was desperate. I told you he needed money. The rival company offered $2 million for these blueprints. That is a lot of money for a mechanic with debt. Veronica felt sick. The logic was there. The motive was there. And after last night, after she had rejected him, maybe he had decided to take what he could get. Caleb, she said, her voice trembling. Did you do this? Caleb looked at her. He saw the doubt in her eyes. It cut deeper than any knife. You have to ask? He said quietly. After everything, I need to know, Veronica whispered. Caleb looked at Marcus, then back at Veronica. He realized then that he had already lost. She expected everyone to hurt her, so she was looking for the knife in his hand before he even moved. He did not steal from you, Caleb said, his voice ringing with a quiet dignity. My father, Frank, taught me that a man is only as good as his word. I gave you my word. If that is not enough for you, then nothing I say will matter. It is not enough, Marcus interrupted. We have the drive. We have the motive. Security, escort him out. Veronica stayed silent. She felt paralyzed. Part of her wanted to scream at the guards to stop, but the terrified part of her, the part that believed she was unlovable, whispered that this was inevitable. Of course he stole from her. Everyone did. I am firing you, Mr. Vance, she said, her voice dead and hollow. Caleb stiffened. No de once, slowly. Fine. I will get my daughter. We will be gone in an hour. He turned and walked out of the office. He did not look back. He did not fight the guards. He walked with his head high, leaving Veronica alone with the man who had framed him and the silence that suddenly felt like a prison. The estate was quiet. Too quiet. Veronica sat in her living room, a glass of wine untouched on the table. It had been 6 hours since Caleb left. The rain had started again, tapping against the windows like a relentless accusation. She had won. The thief was gone. The company's secrets were safe. Marcus had patted her on the back, telling her she made the tough call, the right call. So why did she feel like she was dying? She could not stop thinking about his eyes when she fired him. There was no anger, only a profound disappointment. And that name he had mentioned again, Frank. My father, Frank, taught me. Veronica stood up. She could not sit there anymore. She grabbed her coat and walked out into the rain. She crossed the wet lawn, her heels sinking into the mud, drawn like a moth to a flame toward the guest house. It was dark. The windows were black. She unlocked the door with her master key and stepped inside. The air still smelled like him soap, leather, and something warm. The house was empty. The toys were gone. The clothes were gone. He had reset himself from her life as efficiently as he had entered it. Veronica walked through the living room, checking for, she did not know what, closer, proof that he was guilty. She walked into the bedroom. The bed was stripped. The closet was open and bare. But then, she saw it. In the rush to pack, in the panic of leaving before the police could be called, something had fallen behind the nightstand. It was the old, battered leather portfolio Caleb had carried on the first day. Veronica knelt down, her hands trembling. She picked it up. It was heavy. She sat on the edge of the mattress and opened it. It was not full of stolen corporate secrets. It was not full of blueprints. It was full of drawings. Drawings by Lily, to Daddy, to Mommy in heaven. And underneath the drawings was an old photo album. The cover was cracked leather. Veronica opened it. The first page was a wedding photo. A young Caleb, smiling, holding a woman who looked like Lily. She turned the pages. Caleb working in a shop. Caleb holding a baby. And then, she turned to the middle of the album. The breath froze in her throat. It was a photo of an older man standing in front of a garage. He was wiping his hands on a rag, smiling at the camera. He was big, broad-shouldered, with kind eyes. Above him, the sign read, Frank's Auto Repair. Veronica touched the photo. Her finger traced the man's face. She knew this face. The memory hit her with the force of a physical blow. 15 years ago. The rain. The dark highway. She was 19, pregnant with a child she would eventually lose to a miscarriage, broke and terrifyingly alone. Her car had died. She was sobbing on the steering wheel. A knock on the window. A big man with a kind face. He did not ask for anything. He towed her car to his shop. He fixed the alternator. He gave her a sandwich. And when she tried to offer him her watch because she had no money, he pushed it back. Keep it, kid. You are going to need time. Dignity isn't bought, it's earned. Just pass it on when you can. His name was Frank. Veronica stared at the photo, tears blurring her vision. She looked at the young boy standing next to Frank in the picture. The boy with the dark, intense eyes. Caleb. A sob broke from her chest, echoing in the empty room. He was Frank's son, the man who had saved her life when she was nothing. The man she had tried to find for years to repay him, but never could, because the shop had closed, and she had just accused his son of being a thief. She had just thrown Frank's granddaughter onto the street. Veronica stood up, clutching the album to her chest. The horror of what she had done washed over her. She had let her fear, her paranoia, and Marcus' lies destroy the only real connection she had found in years. She remembered the scar on Caleb's hand, the same scar Frank had. He promised to pay it back. She whispered to the empty room, and instead, I destroyed them. She ran out of the guest house. She ran back to the main mansion, slipping on the wet grass, not caring about the mud rining her clothes. She burst into the hallway, shouting for her assistant. Find him, she screamed, her voice cracking. Her assistant appeared, looking terrified. M.S. Stone. Who? Caleb Vance, Veronica yelled. Find out where he went. Call every motel, every shelter, every contact in his file. Get the private investigator on the line. Now. But A's a thief, the assistant stammered. A's not a thief, Veronica cried, tears streaming down her face. A's the only honest man I have ever met. And I need to find him before I lose him forever. She grabbed her car keys. She was not going to wait for the investigators. She was going to tear the city apart herself, if she had to. She had a debt to pay. A debt of money. Yes, but now, a debt of love. And she was terrified. She was too late. Veronica drove the black sports car like a weapon. The windshield wipers slashed back and forth, fighting a losing battle against the torrential Seattle downpour. She gripped the steering wheel, so hard her knuckles turned white. her eyes scanning the dark, slick streets of the city. She had called the private investigator, a man named Silas, who usually handled corporate espionage. He had tracked Caleb's truck via an old GPS signal to a motel on the outskirts of the industrial district. But when Veronica arrived, the truck was there, but Caleb was gone. The motel clerk, a man with yellow teeth and a suspicious stare, had told her that the guy in room 4 had left on foot an hour ago, heading toward the iron yards. Veronica knew the iron yards. It was a graveyard for shipping containers and abandoned factories. It was also where the underground, illegal racing circuit operated. It was dangerous, unregulated, and exactly the kind of place a man would go if he needed cash fast and had nothing left to lose. She turned the car down a narrow alleyway, the headlights cutting through the gloom. Her heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She was not Veronica Stone, the CEO, tonight. She was just a woman trying to outrun a mistake that felt fatal. Her phone buzzed on the passenger seat. She tapped the speakerphone. Miss Stone, it is Silas. Where is he? Veronica demanded, swerving around a pothole. He found a ping on his cell phone. Silas said, his voice crackling with static. He's at a warehouse on 4th Street, the one with the red doors. But Miss Stone, you should not go there alone. That is a chop shop. It is run by a local gang. I do not care, Veronica snapped. I am sending police backup, Silas warned. Do not dare, Veronica shouted. If the police show up, Caleb could get arrested just for being there. I handle this myself. She hung up. She saw the warehouse ahead. It was a massive, rotting structure of corrugated metal. Heavy bass music thumped from inside, shaking the puddles on the ground. A fire barrel burned by the entrance, surrounded by men in leather jackets. Veronica parked her car in the shadows, killing the lights. She took a deep breath. She looked down at her muddy shoes and her ruined silk blouse. She looked like a disaster. She stepped out into the rain. The men by the fire barrel straightened up as she approached. They looked at her expensive clothes, then at the darkness behind her, expecting a bodyguard. Lost, sweetheart? One of them sneered, stepping into her path. Veronica did not flinch. She stopped inches from him, channeling every ounce of authority she had built over 15 years in boardrooms. I am looking for a mechanic, she said, her voice cutting through the noise like a razor blade. Tall, dark hair. Arrived an hour ago, the man laughed. We got a lot of mechanics. Who is asking? Veronica reached into her purse. She pulled out a roll of cash. Emergency money. She always kept. She held it up. The owner of the building. She lied smoothly. And if you do not let me in, I make one phone call and the police raid this place within 10 minutes. Or, you take this, step aside, and forget I was ever here. The man looked at the cash. He looked at her eyes. He realized she was not bluffing. He snatched the money and jerked his head toward the metal door. He is in the back, working on the drift cars. Veronica pushed past him and shoved the heavy door open. The noise inside was deafening. The smell of gasoline and burnt rubber hit her like a physical wall. The warehouse was a cavern of activity. Cars were being stripped for parts in one corner, modified for racing in another. Veronica walked through the chaos, dodging sparks from welding torches. She scanned every face. Then she saw him. Caleb was under the hood of a battered muscle car, surrounded by smoke. He was shirtless, his skin smeared with grease and sweat. He was wrenching a bolt with a ferocity that looked like he was trying to tear the engine apart. He looked exhausted. He looked broken. Veronica stopped. Her throat tightened. She watched him work for a moment, seeing the sheer physical toll her accusation had taken on him. He wasn't fighting for money. He was working himself into the ground to numb the pain. Caleb, she called out, though her voice was swallowed by the revving of an engine nearby. She moved closer. She reached out and touched his shoulder. Caleb spun around, a wrench raised in defense. When he saw her, the wrench lowered slowly. His eyes widened, but then, instantly, they went cold, harder than steel. He wiped his face with a rag, smearing the grease further. Get out of here, he said. His voice was flat. Dead. Caleb, please, Veronica started, shouting over the noise. We need to talk. There is nothing to talk about, Caleb yelled back, turning back to the car. You fired me. You called me a thief. Go back to your tower, Veronica. You do not belong here. I know, she screamed. I know I was wrong. Caleb froze. It did not turn around. He found the album, Veronica shouted, stepping closer to his back. He found the photo of Frank. Caleb's shoulders stiffened. He slowly set the wrench down on the fender of the car. The noise of the warehouse seemed to fade into a dull roar as he turned to face her. Do not say his name, Caleb warned, his voice shaking with suppressed rage. You do not get to say his name. He saved me, Veronica cried, tears mixing with the rain on her face, 15 years ago. On the highway. He saved my life, Caleb. Caleb looked at her, confusion warring with his anger. What are you talking about? He asked. Veronica took a step forward, ignoring the grease and the dirt. She needed him to understand. I was 19, she said, her words tumbling out fast. I was pregnant. I was alone. My car broke down in the rain. I had no money, no phone, no hope. A man stopped. A mechanic. He fixed my car. He gave me cash for food. He told me that dignity is earned. Caleb stared at her. The anger in his face began to crack. He knew that phrase. It was his father's code. He gave me a chance when no one else would, Veronica continued, her voice breaking. I tried to find him. I went back to the shop years later, but it was closed. I never knew what happened to him. Until tonight, until I saw the photo in your room. She reached out, grabbing his dirty hands with her clean ones. You are Frank's son, she whispered, and I accused you of stealing from me. I am so sorry, Caleb. I was scared. Marcus framed you, and I let my fear win. Caleb looked down at their joined hands. The contrast between them, her manicured fingers. His scarred, grease-stained knuckles was stark. But for the first time, it did not feel like a divide. It felt like a connection. He looked up at her eyes. He saw the truth there. He saw the regret. My father died broke, Caleb said quietly. He gave away everything he had to help people. He died wondering if it mattered. It mattered, Veronica sobbed. It mattered to me. I am who I am because of him, and I am in love with his son. The words hung in the smoky air between them. Caleb stopped breathing for a second. What did you say? He whispered. I love you, Veronica repeated, firmer this time. He tried to fight it. He tried to hide behind my money and my title. But I love you, and I do not care about the scandal. I do not care about the board. I just want you to come home. Caleb looked at her. He saw the woman beneath the suit. He saw the girl who had been saved by his father on a rainy highway. He pulled his hands away from hers, and for a terrifying second, Veronica thought he was going to reject her. Instead, he reached up and cupped her face, smearing grease on her cheeks, rining her perfect makeup. You are a mess, he murmured, a small smile breaking through his beard. You made me a mess, Veronica laughed, through her tears. Caleb leaned down and kissed her. It was not like the kiss at the gala. This was not a performance. It was a promise. It tasted of salt and rain and oil, but to Veronica, it tasted like forgiveness. He pulled back, resting his forehead against hers. We have to go, he said, his voice serious again. This place is not safe, and we have work to do. Work? Veronica asked, blinking. Marcus, Caleb said, his eyes darkening. He thinks he won. He thinks I am gone. He is gone, Veronica said. He has the drive. He has the board on his side. Caleb reached into his back pocket. He pulled out a small, black digital recorder. At the gala, Caleb said, when he tried to bribe me, he recorded the whole conversation. He admitted to hiring the spy. He admitted to wanting to ruin you. Infected, Veronica stared at the device. Her mouth fell open. You recorded him? He told you, Caleb grinned, the old spark returning to his eyes. I am security. I am always prepared. Veronica let out a laugh of pure relief. She threw her arms around his neck, burying her face in his chest, not caring about the dirt, rining her silk blouse. You are brilliant, she whispered. Let's go home, Caleb said, wrapping his arm around her waist. "Let's go get Lily. And then, let's go take back your company." They walked out of the warehouse together, past the racers and the criminals, past the fire barrel and the rain. They walked to the black sports car. This time, Caleb opened the door for her. "I will drive," Veronica said, tossing him the keys. Caleb caught them. "Are you sure? It is an expensive car." "It is just a car," Veronica said, smiling at him with a warmth that lit up the dark street. "You are the only thing that matters." Caleb got into the driver's seat. The engine roared to life. As they pulled away from the iron yards, leaving the darkness behind, Caleb reached over and took her hand. Veronica squeezed it tight. The debt was paid. The past was healed. And the future was wide open. The boardroom of Vanguard Holdings was a shark tank disguised as a meeting place. 12 members of the board sat around the long mahogany table, their expressions grim. At the head of the table, sitting in Veronica's chair, was Marcus. He looked relaxed, almost bored, tapping a gold pen against the polished wood. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus said, his voice smooth and confident, "we cannot delay this any longer. Veronica Stone has made a series of catastrophic errors. She hired a criminal, she compromised our security, and now she has disappeared during a crisis. The stock dropped 4% this morning alone. We need leadership. I am asking for a vote of no confidence effective immediately." The board members murmured amongst themselves. They were frightened. They cared about their dividends, not loyalty. One by one, they began to raise their hands. Marcus smiled. It was a smile of pure victory. He had won. He had destroyed the queen and taken the throne. Suddenly, the double doors at the far end of the room flew open with a violence that made the heavy wood shudder against the walls. Every head turned. Veronica Stone strode into the room. She was not wearing her usual pristine armor. Her hair was wild, damp from the rain. Her silk blouse was stained with grease. Her makeup was smeared. She looked like she had just walked out of a war zone, and she looked terrified. Not of them, but terrifying to them. Beside her walked Caleb. He was still wearing his mechanic's work boots and jeans, his knuckles black with oil. He walked with a predator's grace, scanning the room, daring anyone to move. "He did not realize the meeting started without me," Veronica said, her voice echoing off the glass walls. Marcus stood up, his face losing its color for a fraction of a second before he regained his composure. "Security," he barked. "Remove these intruders, Mr. Banse is a fired employee and a thief." 2 guards by the door stepped forward, reaching for Caleb. Caleb did not raise his hands. He stepped in front of Veronica, shielding her. He looked at the guards men he had worked with, men he had shared coffee with during the long night shifts. "Stand down," Caleb ordered quietly. The guards hesitated. They looked at Marcus, then at the dangerous resolve in Caleb's eyes. They stopped. "This is a boardroom, not a garage," Marcus shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "Veronica, you are embarrassing yourself. We are voting you out. It is over." "It is over," Veronica agreed, walking past the guards to the head of the table. "But not for me." She reached into her pocket and pulled out the small digital recorder. She placed it in the center of the table, next to the conference speakerphone. "What is that?" a board member asked nervously. "The truth," Caleb said. He pressed the play button. The room fell silent. Then, a voice crackled through the tiny speaker. It was unmistakable. It was Marcus. "He did a background check on you. I know about the debt. I know about the eviction. Here is a check for $50,000. Take it, walk out that door, and leave Veronica to me." The board members froze. Marcus's eyes went wide. He lunged across the table to grab the recorder. Caleb moved faster than thought. He caught Marcus's wrist in midair, twisting it sharply until Marcus yelped and fell back into his chair. "Sit down," Caleb growled. "We are not finished." The recording continued. "You think she cares about you? You are a prop. A distraction." Then, Caleb's voice on the tape, clear and strong. "I am not for sale." Veronica stopped the recording. She looked around the table. The board members were looking at Marcus with a mixture of shock and disgust. Corporate sabotage was one thing. Getting caught on tape bribing an employee to frame the CEO was a felony. You hired the spy, Veronica said, her voice cold and absolute. You staged the alarm. You framed Caleb because you knew he was the only one standing between you and my position. Marcus sputtered, pulling at his collar. It is fake. It is I-generated. This mechanic doctor did it. I have the original metadata, Caleb said calmly. It is time-stamped to the night of the gala. And I have the torn pieces of the check you tried to give me. The police are already analyzing the fingerprints on them. The silence in the room was heavy, suffocating. The chairman of the board, an elderly man who had remained silent until now, stood up. He looked at Marcus with eyes like ice. You are fired, Marcus. Effective immediately. And I suggest you call a lawyer. The securities fraud investigation will be thorough. Marcus looked around the room. He saw no allies. He saw only the end of his career. He looked at Caleb, hatred burning in his eyes. You are nothing. He spat at Caleb. You are just a grease monkey. Caleb smiled. It was the smile of a man who knew exactly who he was. I am the guy who fixed your mess, Caleb said. Security escorted Marcus out of the room. As the doors closed behind him, the tension in the room broke. Veronica took a deep breath. She looked at the board members. Apologies for the disruption, she said, smoothing her ruined shirt. But we are going to make some changes. Starting today, Vanguard Holdings is going to operate differently. She turned to Caleb. I am appointing a new director of community integrity, she announced. Someone who understands that profit cannot come at the cost of people. Someone who knows that dignity is earned, not bought. The board members looked at Caleb. He was dirty, underdressed, and untrained in corporate finance. But they had just seen him take down a tyrant without throwing a single punch. They nodded. 6 months later, the summer sun bathed the stone estate in golden light. The air smelled of blooming roses and freshly cut grass. In the driveway, Caleb was teaching Lily how to ride a bicycle. She was laughing, her helmet slightly askew, as she wobbled down the pavement. You are doing it, Caleb cheered, running alongside her. Keep pedaling. On the balcony of the main house, Veronica watched them. She held a cup of tea, feeling a peace she had never known existed. The company was thriving. The stock was up. But more importantly, the house was no longer a fortress of solitude. It was a home. She heard footsteps behind her. Caleb stepped onto the balcony, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. He rested his chin on her shoulder. She is fast, he murmured, watching his daughter. She takes after her dad, and she is stubborn, Veronica added, leaning back into him. She takes after her stepmom. Caleb turned her around. He looked different now. He wore tailored clothes, though he still refused to wear a tie unless absolutely necessary. But his eyes were the same dark, intense, and full of love. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Veronica stopped breathing. He did not buy this with a big salary, Caleb said softly. He restored a 1967 Mustang in my spare time and sold it. I wanted to earn this, just like my father taught me. He opened the box. Inside was a simple, elegant diamond ring. Veronica Stone, he whispered. You saved my life when I was drowning. You gave my daughter a home. Will you let me spend the rest of my life paying you back? Veronica looked at the ring, then at the man who had brought her back to life. She thought of the rain, the broken car, and the mechanic named Frank who had started this entire circle of kindness 15 years ago. The debt is paid, Caleb, she whispered, tears filling her eyes. It is all paid. She nodded. Caleb kissed her. Below them, Lily rang her bicycle bell, a sound of pure joy echoing through the estate. The mechanic and the billionaire stood together in the sunlight, proving that while money could build towers, only love could build a future. If you believe that true love is worth fighting for, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Share this story with someone who needs to believe in miracles today. Thank you for watching, and remember, kindness always finds its way back home.